It truly is an honor to be here today. I've built a relationship over the last several years with the Institute, and it's one that's very exciting to me, how much this has grown over the last several years and what it represents. So it really means a lot for me to be here. So Dr. Lanchowski, thank you so much for those kind words. I was sitting there listening. I was trying to think of who you were talking about as you were describing that, but I really do appreciate your very, very kind words. I'm hoping somebody taped it so I can let other people listen to it. You know, as I was listening to a couple of things that people said, there's something I feel obligated to say. As I stand here in front of you, 37 years of service in our military, and I wear these medals, and a lot of them represent combat operations. But one of the misperceptions that many people have is they think that people who wear this uniform and have all these medals want to go to war. And there's nothing further from the truth. Once you've experienced the chaos of war and the destruction of war and all the things that go along with it, you realize that it absolutely should be something of a last resort. And that's why what you're learning is so important. What are the methods that cause us to prevent conflict? That we become more of a deterrence that never has to be used. And it struck me in the comments as you talked about the Cold War, as I spent about 8 years of my career over in Europe as part of the force to stand up against the Soviet Union. So I think that's very, very important as we think forward here about what you want to do. Again, many thanks to Dr. Mike Waller, the Provost, and Mr. Owen Smith, the Chairman. Thank you so much for conferring this great honor upon me today. I'm not sure what have confused my first generation Italian-American parents more, who unfortunately no longer with us, is me being the Chief of Staff of the Army or me receiving a doctorate from this prestigious institution. You see, I come from fairly humble beginnings back in New Jersey, and this school celebrates, frankly, a lot of the core values upon which I was raised. Respect for learning, love of country, and the imperative of service and civic action in order to give back to one's community, one's nation, one's people. So it's an honor for me to share the stage with all of you here today. I accept this honorary doctorate of laws on behalf of the American soldier and the 1.1 million men and women in uniform today. I often get asked the question, why have you served 37 years in the Army? And I tell them, it's because of those soldiers. They inspire me every single day with their dedication, with a willingness to raise their right hand and say, I will defend the Constitution of the United States of America. It takes special people to decide to do that, because they don't have to, because our force is a volunteer force. Many people come in the Army or the Navy or the Air Force or the Marine Corps for many different reasons, but they have one common value, and that's to serve their country. So I accept this on their behalf. I want to thank everyone for allowing me to speak this great day, to celebrate the accomplishments of the 57 current and future statesmen, military leaders, and national security professionals that we're honoring here today. General George C. Marshall, who I believe is probably one of the great leaders, if not the greatest leader of our country and thinkers in the history of our military and our nation, often spoke of the unique tools necessary for success as a strategic leader. As a Chief of Staff, he said, it became clear to me at the age of 58 that I would have to learn new tricks that were not taught to me in military manuals or on the battlefield. In this position, I am a political soldier, and I'll have to put my training in wrapping out orders and making snap decisions on the back burner, and have to learn the arts of persuasion and guile. I must become an expert in a whole new set of skills. Your education here at the Institute of World Politics marks a critical juncture in your career. The transition from using a military term, tactical to strategic leaders. Strategic leadership requires an understanding of the intricacies of the environment It requires the ability to craft and communicate a vision. It requires selfless commitment to your organization and the people that you might ask to be led, no matter what you might choose to do. It requires that you demonstrate both competence and character in every action that you take. It requires the development and mentorship of the next generation of young leaders that comes behind you. Your leadership in critical positions across our government and between governments, within the military, in the nonprofit sector, and in the private sector are essential to shaping a more positive future. IWP's commitment to developing leaders in international affairs, national security and intelligence, with an eye towards the practice of strategy across all instruments of national power, is essential to achieving positive strategic effect in today's complex and uncertain security environment. From my perspective, there's no better time for you to join the ranks of the nation's strategic leaders. We're at another crossroads in our nation's history, one which we face an uncertain security environment exacerbated by our own fiscal and economic instability. Throughout the course of history, world events have always presented states and their militaries with complexity and unpredictability. Today's environment sustains this norm, but adds the unprecedented speed at which events unfold and information travels. So therefore, the pace of change is accelerating. There are emerging factors at work in today's strategic environment that we just simply cannot ignore. The sheer number of connections between people and societies has increased exponentially. An ever-present global media can instantaneously elevate local actions to strategic import. Technology and weapons, once reserved for states, can now find their way into the hands of disinfected individuals and disruptive groups. International tolerance for civilian casualties and collateral damage from military operations has decreased, while the capabilities to inflict such damage have spread to a growing number of illicit actors. As experienced as our Army and our military are today, after the past 12 years of war, we must ensure that the Department of Defense and the rest of the U.S. government are prepared for the future security challenges our nation will face. And adding to the uncertainty in our security environment, our country's inability to put its fiscal house in order is compromising our national security. Therefore, the Department of Defense and the Army must play a critical role in reducing government spending and strengthening our nation's economy, because our economy is the foundation of our nation's strength. We have and will continue to do our part to find efficiencies and reduce costs in how we do business. However, it is critical that our government return to a predictable budgetary process so that we can plan ahead and efficiently and effectively manage resources that we are given. Our domestic fiscal constraints, however, do not diminish budding threats overseas. Many of the challenges we face are in the headlines every day, whether it be the aggressiveness of North Korea and Iran, the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, or continued turmoil across the Middle East and North Africa, or the growing threat of cyber warfare. As a department and as a government, we must make decisions based on the context of the security environment and the historical experience, not false assumptions about the future. As a result of our fiscal challenges, some tough choices are being made across the defense establishment. My foremost priority is still to ensure our forces deployed, next to deploy and forward station, have the resources they need. As I stand here today, there are 80,000 U.S. soldiers deployed around the world, and another 90,000 stationed in 150 countries. Our nation has been in a state of continuous war for nearly 12 years. Since 9/11, we have grown a generation of experienced, combat-tested leaders and soldiers. More than 1.5 million soldiers have deployed. and more than 500,000 have deployed 2, 3, 4, or more times. Many of the military officers, intelligence professionals, and foreign service officers with us here today can personally attest to that. As history has shown, we can't predict the future. But strategic uncertainty is no excuse for inaction. Instead, we must assess risk and take action to mitigate these risks. We can best do this by having a flexible, adaptable force capable of meeting many different challenges. And we will do this by striking the right balance. We are at a strategic inflection point in our history. As U.S. combat operations in Afghanistan draw down, we are taking a hard look at how we preserve the hard-earned lessons of Iraq and Afghanistan and adapt our national security institutions for the future. As part of this process, the U.S. Army is rededicating itself to the development of its leaders. It is the surest way to be prepared for any future contingency. Leadership underpins everything that we do, which is why we'll continue to invest in our most important resource, our people. Our focus on leader development is one of the mindset more than resource. For the most part, we already have the infrastructure, expertise, and personnel required. Going forward, however, we must invest most heavily in talent management so that we identify the unique skills, education, broadening experiences necessary to match the right people with the right assignments at the right time in their careers. It is this reason that the Army particularly is indebted to the Institute of World Politics, because they have opened their doors to the Army fellows and most recently to our Army strategists. The creation of a one-year basic strategic arts program certificate is an invaluable addition to our mid-career training of Army officers specializing in the practice of strategy. I've been so impressed by the education, diversity of curriculum and faculty, and the civil-military blend of experience that all of our Army officers and all of you have received. General Omar Bradley, who was known as the soldier's general, intuitively understood the strengths and limits of military power and the necessity of integrating direct and indirect instruments of national power. During World War II, he said, battles are won by the infantry, the armor, the artillery, and air teams, by soldiers living in the rains and huddling in the snow. But wars are actually won by the great strength of a nation, and it must be the soldier and the civilian working together. I learned this repeatedly throughout my commands in Iraq. As was mentioned earlier, when I was the 4th Infantry Division commander, it became clear to me very quickly on the ground that we completely misunderstood the political, economic, social dynamics of the conflict. We did not understand the societal devastation that occurred during the previous 20 years in Iraq and the economic impact that sanctions had across the population. We did not understand that when we overthrew Saddam Hussein and the Ba'athist government, all of the political, ethnic, and religious dynamics that had boiling for many, many years would explode. If we had understood it better, we would have been better prepared. We might have come up with better solutions, so we wouldn't have to spend 8 years in Iraq. That's why we need courses like this. So we study, understand the environments that we're going to have to operate in. I want to commend the leadership and faculty of IWP for your commitment to growing strategic leaders. I commend each of the graduates today for your hard work and dedication to the task of learning strategy. And most importantly, I thank each of the family members who stand alongside the graduates and provide them with moral support to complete this tremendous milestone in their career. But I want to end by saying one thing. I implore all of you to use this great gift of education to make a difference. no matter what part of society you choose to work, we need you to make a difference. Dedicate yourself to something with passion. Follow that passion. Use this education and make this a better country. We live in the best country in the world. As I have a chance to go all over the world in my endeavors, the one thing that is very clear: there is no nation like the United States of America. There is no nation that allows each individual to rise and perform to the best of his abilities and provides them the opportunities to do whatever they want. But it is your choice. It is your choice. And I challenge you to make the best use of that choice. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here today. I wish you nothing but the best of luck and great success in the future. Thank you very much. God bless America.